into the babies that we know nothing about. Now, I am not suggesting that we abandon the use of vaccines. I certainly think vaccines have accomplished a lot, but I am really questioning, number one, we are certainly seeing more chronic kids than we have ever seen in the history of medicine. The number of autism, you know how those numbers have gone up. When I did a presentation similar to this to the child development team here at University of South Florida, and I asked the head of neurology, Dr. Girona, I said, you know, are you to think that we're better diagnosing now, or do you really think that there's something different going on here? And she's like, David, we have never seen anything like this before. This is an epidemic. These are just numbers that we didn't see. 10 years ago when I was at Tampa General, there was a child with autism. They brought the entire pediatric department over to see him because we may never see one again. Now you can't even walk down the supermarket or walk down the mall without seeing a child with autism. There's something going on, and we're trying to put it all together. Now, we also know that there are really more problems than we've ever seen before, and I'm just concerned not just even in terms of autism, but the number of diabetes and asthma and allergies, and those things seem to be connected as well.
In July 2001, the American Academy of Pediatrics Committee on Environmental Health stated, "Mercury in all of its forms is toxic to the fetus and children."
Now, back in 2001, when this problem was originally identified, the Academy of Pediatrics itself went on record and said, minimizing mercury exposure is essential to optimal health. Mercury in all of its forms is toxic to the fetus and children, and efforts should be made to reduce exposure to the extent possible to pregnant women and children, as well as the general population. Now, when they went through the initial hearings at the Institute of Medicine and the congressional hearings, they originally talked about there was 0.01% mercury, thimerosal, in the vaccines, which meant it was 99.99% free. Well, I think most people would be thrilled to have something 99.99% free of something. But they never actually looked at the numbers. And so Dr. Neil Halsey, who was at Johns Hopkins, who was the one that was making the recommendation, when they actually added up the numbers, they said, how did this happen? And his answer on record, on congressional record, was, well, no one really knows what dose of mercury, no one ever did the math. No one knows what dose of mercury, if any, from vaccines is safe. We can say that there is no evidence of harm, but the truth is no one has looked.
The 2008 Journal of Allergy Clinical Immunology stated, among 11,531 children who received at least 4 doses of DPT, the risk of asthma was reduced by half in children whose first dose of DPT was delayed by more than 2 months.
Well, vaccines may actually also affect the immune system itself. I think that the mercury may have been one of the players at the table, but I don't think that the mercury was the only problem that we have here. But what at the University of Manitoba, and this is a study, it wasn't looking at children with autism, it was looking at children with asthma, but you'll understand where I'm going in a second. What they had found is that many early childhood vaccinations have been viewed as promoters of asthma development by stimulating what's called a Th2 type immune response, shifting the cytokine balance. What they were able to say is that from a study from 2002, at birth, the newborn immune system has a limited ability to produce the Th1 cells. So they start off in an imbalance to begin with, before anything's done with them. And then over the course of the next 6 months, then the balance starts to become to more adult levels. Children who were given their vaccines at 2 months of age as opposed to 4 months of age, just by delaying it 2 months to 4 months of age, reduced the risk of asthma, the rate of asthma, by 50%. 50% reduction in asthma just by waiting 2 months and letting that Th1 to T2 balance go. They did find, furthermore, that there was greater as they went for the first 3 doses. So the longer that they delayed, the more that they were able to maintain the immune system. So this goes to the question of maybe we're doing this too early. We established, it's a known fact in pediatrics, that babies have weakened immune systems. Any baby before 2 months of age, if they develop a fever, we automatically put them in the hospital, we spinal tap them, we get urine, we get blood, we put them on IV antibiotics for 48 to 72 hours until we prove that it is not a bacterial infection. Why? Because we know that newborn babies are immunodeficient. I don't think that something happens when a baby is 2 months and 1 day old that flips a switch that all of a sudden makes that immune system become completely normal. It takes time, as they've shown, for this to shift over. So if we're saying it's okay that it takes that 2 months of age, we're acknowledging that the immune system isn't intact, then we're going and we're doing something that may be disrupting the immune system. And in fact, one of the things that we also know is that when our bodies, when something's injected into our body, the immune system by definition is altered.
Assistant Professor at the Hubert Department of Global Health and Adjunct Assistant Professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, Dr. Omir has conducted vaccine trials, large-scale surveillance of vaccine-preventable diseases, evaluating the roles of schools, parents, healthcare providers, and state-level legislation in relation to immunization coverage and disease incidence. Dr. Omir is speaking on behalf of the Florida Department of Health.
Institute of Medicine was established in 1970. It's an independent, non-profit organization. It's not an arm of the government. However, to enable it to inform policy, Congress chartered this independent organization to provide input, provide scientific input into biomedical policy. It's part of the National Academies of Sciences, again, which are independent. And then the reason why it represents mainstream science is because, A, there's a vetting process, both in terms of selection of the membership, that it's almost, it's right up there getting a Nobel Prize. Obviously, a little less than that, but I only hope that I'll be a part of IOM someday.
The Center for Disease Control, state health departments, and the pharmaceutical industry, as support for their position, continually cite the 2004 Institute of Medicine's study on immunization safety review, largely based on a prior Denmark study.
The Institute of Medicine looked at this issue specifically looked at MMR and autism, and thimerosal and autism. They had all the evidence, and they had the opportunity of being provided all the evidence that you just saw, and more, and some that they actually, dug out themselves, and they came to these conclusions. The body of epidemiological evidence favors the rejection of a causal relationship between MMR vaccine and autism. The body of epidemiological evidence favors the rejection of a causal relationship between thimerosal-containing vaccines and autism.
You keep referencing IOM. Was that report found to be flawed by Congress?
Here's the thing. I would never go to legislation to IOM. You can say that Congress found it to be flawed. And
Dr. Saad Omir admitted that the Institute of Medicine's 2004 Immunization Safety Review study, which he continually cited, was found to be seriously flawed by Congress and not to be used as scientific evidence. For more on this, we listen to Dr. Boyd Haley. Dr. Haley is a professor emeritus at the University of Kentucky Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. Dr. Haley is one of the world's leading experts on mercury toxicity. He is a member of the autism think tank of the Autism Association and a fellow in the IAOMT. He has presented numerous lectures on the subject of mercury toxicity and neurological diseases at a variety of international conferences and has testified before congressional committees and the Institute of Medicine.
The people who did the study that the gentleman talked about there worked for the Stanton Serum Institute in Denmark. The Stanton Serum Institute makes thimerosal-containing vaccines that they sell to the rest of the world, including the United States, because they cannot use them in Denmark. And the rate of autism in Denmark, when they did that study, and you can look on the data, Madsen figure 1, was less than 5 per 10,000. The rate in the United States at that time was more than 167 per 10,000. So it's like studying the effect of mosquitoes on spreading malaria, and somebody wants you paying me to do that. Well, I can do that. I'll just go do the study in Alaska. You have to do it where the terrain is right. And so there is no autism. The autism epidemic did not occur in Denmark, and yet that's where they paid, and that's the database they built it on. I would also point out that that study was more than slightly stupid. They showed when you took the thimerosal out of the vaccine, you understand you're taking away a severe neurotoxin. Absolutely no question about that. The rate didn't go up a little bit, it went up 20-fold. And it didn't go up in reality, it went up because they manipulated the data. And now, to show that that's right, there should have been a rush from the Danish government, the Swedish government, the Norwegian government, all of the Scandinavian countries, to put thimerosal back in the vaccines to reduce the autism rate, right? If they were correct, common sense. Well, they didn't do it because they know crap just as well as I do when they read it, and that's what those studies are that were used by the 2004 IOM committee, and they were using their reputation to push this data through, and they called these well-designed studies. I'm a hardcore scientist. I believe in numbers, and when I look at that, I almost threw up. And if you go to look at the tape of that meeting, I asked Dr. Hibbett, what's the rate of autism in the United States versus Denmark, where your cohort data? And he stumbled and bumbled around, and he acted like he didn't know what I was saying, like he couldn't speak English, but he'd just given a perfectly good seminar in English. And after asking him twice, I said, just tell me, you know, you're not doing this study on a good database. It's invalid. And then